Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rugby with Pads. Now, for you guys, it probably hasn't seemed long since I spoke to you. You've had weekly episodes for the last few weeks, which hopefully you've enjoyed. And it's tried to fit. What we've tried to do is fill out our beginner series. So, looking at the league as a whole over the last few weeks, looking at some core concepts, the Fancy 102. So maybe a bit more intermediate than we've had in the past from the 101, and the Fancy A to Z as well, not A to Z. We're not that American. But today we're going to do something a little bit different and maybe a bit more self-indulgent. Now, when I started being a commissioner for my League of Record, what I wanted to do is make sure that we were that we were adding stories to the mix, and that was really important to me. It was really important for me to make sure that we had something that was tangible and personal to the entire league, and yeah, and really what we've done out of it is driven out some rivalries, and also some kind of roles within the group as well. We have a historian, technically, we have a power ranker, we've got a commissioner, and out of those, what I like to do is build up those histories and make it feel more like the real NFL. And in the NFL, you have things like power rankings, you have things like draft review shows and things like that. So this is a very self-indulgent show, not for me necessarily, but for our League of Record. Not League of Record, this is our Dynasty League of Record. So today's episode, if you were hoping to tune in and get a bit of insight into what you should be doing with your team over the coming weeks, this is probably not the show for you. What it is a show for is what kind of things that maybe you should be emulating. And what I'll try and do is give a bit of Dynasty advice. But if you're entering a Dynasty League or looking to start a Dynasty League, these are the kind of things that I think are probably quite important, really. And things that I think you could be using and building upon to help drive activity within the league, and also to just make sure that everyone's going to be enjoying it as well, and have a little bit of fun. Without going around the houses, what I've done is I've taken a look at our league over the past few months. So what we have had is a few power ranking episodes in our own league, so ones that haven't been released. I've released some on the pod before, but talking about how good and bad some of the teams are, what their prospects are for next year, all leading up to the draft. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I'm recording this on the 20th, so actually we finished this nearly a month ago. We finished our draft nearly a month ago, but we had the draft, and it was a slow draft. It happened over the course of about 10 days, over 40 picks. It was a big old effort, but those selecting their rookies for the next year. And what we've done in this episode is take a look at everything that happened there, and there was a lot happening. The reason we did a slow draft was so we could experience trading mid-draft as well. Now, you'll see a lot of deadline day trades in the real league, and we'll see a lot of a lot of draft day trades as well, people moving up and down, all that stuff, and we had loads of that. And I did a poll on Twitter, and normally people in their leagues get about 5 or 6 drafts during their rookie draft. We had 11, which is crazy. And we are not a league that typically trades a lot. We made a couple of changes to the rules and to the roster sizes, which we'll go over, which will hopefully explain why there was a lot of trade activity and why people needed to get into those positions. But this is going to be a bit of a jaunt through that. We're going to be taking a kind of analytical approach, or semi-analytical approach, not just based off numbers, but based off my own opinions as well. And we're going to be looking at who won the draft and who, based on post-draft activity, will look at the rosters and see who we think is going to come out great. And finally, we'll do a bit of a Road to Redemption review. So Road to Redemption is my series where I've taken the once great team that won the league in the first year, that then came dead last in the second year, and who's looking to come back. I'm looking to do a quick turnaround rebuild. We did a bit of an episode on it the other week, where we discussed whether it was feasible. And you know what? I went for it in the draft. Whether it's going to come out good is to be decided, but yeah, we'll talk about what our options are open to us following the draft. So, without further ado, that was a heck of a preamble. If you've lasted 5 minutes and you're still interested, please stay on. For those of you in the league, you'll be getting this in the feeds anyway. But without further ado, let's crack on with the Dynasty draft review for 2023. Right, let's jump into this. Hopefully this all works because I can't see my own face on OBS. But yeah, we're gonna do a PowerPoint because it was the best way I could think of to make this work. So yes, welcome to the first annual draft report for the 2023-2024 season, focusing on our recent rookie draft in the never-ending quest for the eighth ring, which is the newly titled league. It was the better league by far, but as a homage to our league of record, which is the best league by far. But we've changed it over this last year. But yeah, a lot of activity. And let's do a bit of a draft breakdown to start with. There was a lot going on. As I mentioned before, the league actually did it a bit quicker than I thought. It wasn't over 10 days. It was over about 5 or 6 days we did this. We had a bit of a burst of activity with some slowdowns across a few people because we were running over time zones. This was a slow draft. Average pick time of about 3 hours, which seemed longer in the midst of it, but maybe it wasn't. But we had some things that changed a lot of people's thoughts. One of which was the effects of the rookie rule. Now, John, who won the league last year, started a rule because we get a rule change if you win the league. So even though you're getting the last draft spot, you still have an advantage by winning the league, by being able to put together a league rule change. And he said that despite after some exceptions, we'll have a couple of exceptions during the league, in terms of bye weeks and things like that, you have to start a rookie. Now, this meant for some players who didn't have a first round pick, and one of our new members who took over a spot, I think he was drafting third or fourth. Yes, I think it was Rob who's drafting fourth here. He didn't have a first, second, or I think even third round pick at one point. So it was going to be looking to draft in the fourth. So it's going to be a really good thing for people who are drafting early in the first round because they're going to have people like Bijan Robinson who are going to play week in, week out, Anthony Richardson who's going to get a good chance, and some of the other quarterbacks who they can plug and play into their super flex. But it probably does mean that you've had people reaching for players who are going to get playtime, and that meant that there are some peculiar picks, and there was some interesting draft strategy. I'm going to pick on Kristen, who I actually secretly like, but Laporta being picked probably a round and a half earlier than we expected him to go, and some interesting decisions in the third round as well. But you know what? Secretly, I quite liked it on the face of it because I like people who zig when everyone's zagging. There were some players who went for some long game plays as well. I think Dan was key in that with drafting Bijan Robinson at number 1. I think that's very obvious, but Jonathan Mingo was a really interesting choice in the second round. We had Kendre Miller picked by John early on, which I think is a long-term play to protect against Alvin Kamara potentially missing time, but there were some really interesting things, and we had some auto draft brilliance as well from Ed at the number 3 spot. Anthony Richardson, was available. Ed unfortunately lost his phone, so was on auto draft for the whole time, which is probably why it took so long this whole thing to draft anyway. But getting Anthony Richardson, Zay Flowers, and Tank Bigsby, I think he'll be pretty happy with that overall. There were some draft haves and have not. I mean, Touchdown Mojo John, in the end, after some back and forth, ended up with 8 picks, and Rob, coming into it, only had 1, and he got another one through trade. But I think it was really interesting seeing the final round, and I wasn't really involved in the fourth round. I got out after the third, really. But there were some really interesting plays, and John, with a bunch of picks towards the end, really looked for some long-term value. And I think we can. What I want to do is highlight initially some picks that I really liked. I've already spoken about Ed's, 3 picks at the number 3 spot. I think Dan won the quarterback lottery with Will Levis at the start of the third. I think that was really good. Bryce Young and CJ Stroud going a bit later, I thought was really good. Boz, who was at the 5 spot, actually traded it up with me to get to the 5 spot because I didn't want it, and I traded back to the 8 to get Bryce Young. But I think that was interesting how they went, and those are two quarterback needy teams. I suspect. We'll look at the makeup later on, but I think it was a really good pick. I've spoken about John with his pick of his picks in the 4th round. I really like Tank Dell, and I think he will provide splash play, success, and having a rookie wide receiver coming in with a rookie quarterback in Houston, I think it's going to be really interesting. And one of my picks that I really liked in the 4th round was actually Tim at the 409. Sean Tucker. Is it Sean Tucker? I think it is. But I think he has a route to actually be rather successful in Tampa Bay. With Rashad White, I'm not buying the hype. I think he will be the number 1, but I think the number 2 and potentially challenger spots are going to be very, very interesting. There were some more peculiar picks, I think. I worry about Juice Form being Rob's first running back and first rookie off the board in the 4th. So I traded away my pick in the 401 for I think it was another running back. I have to go back and look at that. But I think that was an interesting one. And maybe if you're relying on him, I mean, it's a small running back room at the moment over in Dallas, but no, it's going to be Pollard's room, and potentially with Zeke coming back into the fold, that's going to be interesting. So whether Rob sees value in that is yet to be seen. Ty Spears, I think, went a bit earlier, and I've already spoken about John's Kendrick Miller being maybe a bit early. He was weighing up heavily between him and A.K.A, and I was very fortunate because I was going to trade out of that position if I hadn't have got A.K.A at the 2-1. But some interesting spots there. And of course, there were some ones that I didn't like, but I can respect. Kristen going for the Samuel Porter, Zach Evans, Stetson Bennett, and Dwayne McBride. I think Dwayne McBride is the obvious one that's got a lot more value now that we've had Dalvin Cook out of Minnesota. But there were some really interesting decisions, and I think all of them were quite heavily ahead of ADP. While Rushy Rice going to Kristen, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a homer pick because I think that was projected to go 3-4 potentially. So you know what, might not have got back to a, maybe if it's a player you want, sometimes you go after it, but whether that's going to play well with a crowded and weird room in over in Mahomes land, over in Kansas City, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to see Sky Moore emerge, Kadarius Toney break out, but of course you've got the specter of Travis Kelce. He's going to hoover up all those targets. So whether that'll be a good play, but you know what, she didn't have to worry about being safe. Got a safe pick in CJ Stroud. So maybe I'm convincing myself that I actually like it. A lot of sleeper value in this draft and a lot of value late on. And I think unlike previous years, the 4th round was actually really competitive and people wanted to get in and out. You see, there's a lot of trade markers there because there was actually still value in the 4th round. I think, everyone came out, and I think everyone was reasonably happy with their draft. I think everyone's got something to be happy with. So, on top of that, I did a lot of analysis. I've covered it all up, so you can't see it for now. So, if you want to, you can probably screenshot it and have a look. But over the past few months, I've been looking at roster fits, grading, the team structure against the scoring formats, against how the people are going to be looking, the post-draft ranks, pre-draft ranks, all the best likely fits that people should have potentially gone for. Been doing a lot of analysis there. So what I wanted to highlight here is I haven't just gone for straight numbers like, you got ADP, you got above ADP. No, I'm looking at the team makeup and the balance and depth of the players that they have at their disposal and grading them against each other on a bit of a curve as well. So we give higher grades to people who are going to be better, the A grades, and I look for comparative scores as well. So they are grouped together a little bit. So this is potentially not objectively the best way of doing it, but for our league, when we're looking to compare each other, in a relatively small league, it's a 10 person league, I thought this was the best way to do it. So we got into it, and if you look at the draft, and I did just look at the draft in just on its own, and looked at the value that they had on keep trade cut effectively. That was my first instinct, is look, right, okay, what value did we get? And I created a power rank versus, how much value did you drive out the draft? And obviously the people with the highest number of picks, John over here with 8 picks, had a significant amount more value. If you look at it, you've got loads of picks, you've got loads of potential. But if we really look at what's actually going to land, it's going to be the top 3 players are really going to land well. Now, in most rookie drafts, in the first round, you have about 50-50% success ratio. So 50-50 success ratio. So that means 5 of the picks are probably going to flame out and not be fancy relevant in the first couple of years. In the second round, that drops to about 25%. So maybe 3 of those guys are going to be great. And for me, I hope that A.K.A. is going to be that guy. And then when you get that, it's diminishing returns. It's maybe 15% in the third round and 10% in so maybe we're hoping for 1, maybe 2 breakout successes in the fourth round. Based on that, I did a volume adjusted rank, and Dan came out top, so I don't think it's surprising because he had so much value in Bijan. He managed to secure the 101 thanks to my ineptitude last year. This is purely based on numbers. I haven't favoured myself, but the value that I've driven out of my team for this year, basically, this is based on this year, by the way. This is all how we're going to be ranking into this year. Gibbs is as a number 1 running back. A.K.A. has the potential to become a number 1 running back, and Quentin in a high-powered offense. Quentin Johnson in a high-powered offense, I think, is going to be really interesting. Ed with a third in the ranking there. I think Richardson, Zay Flowers, and Bigsby, I've talked about them already. I think they're great. Oz, I think, drafted really well and jumped up and got some great value in Bryce. Spears was a bit interesting, but I like Downs and Boutte a lot. Although I know Boutte's stock has dropped a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but we'll have to see how he fares. Alex, for her first rookie draft, had a great haul. JSN at number 2, Head and Hooker late on as well, and Maya and Hire, I think, will be fantastic long-term plans. She actually traded out of Kyler Murray, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But if we're looking at the drafted players alone, it's great. Tim, I think, had a quietly really good draft. Addison, I think, is the player that we all kind of wanted, but he managed to get him. And I had a pick, and I based it on the stack of Herbert, so that's why I went for Quentin Johnson. I would have been very happy with Addison as well. Kristen with Stroud, Rice, Chase Brown, and Hull at the end. Some interesting ones. I like Stroud, but they were volume plays, not value plays. John, we've talked about a lot of volume here. He's definitely looking at a rebuild after winning last year. Maybe not a total tank, but definitely a big old rebuild, and he's got stock in next year as well. Kristen, as mentioned, it was some interesting decisions, so I can't have you high on the value. I'm sorry about that, but I like it. Weirdly enough, I really do like it, and I even like the Dwayne McBride. I'd probably put you above John now if I'm taking it in a vacuum. And Rob, unfortunately, didn't have much to play with, but and being 2 fourth rounders, you're always going to struggle there. So I think this doesn't really tell us full story, though. It's not going to tell us how people are going to perform, and that's where I want to look at trades. And I'm going to pivot, because the story of this draft isn't just from these picks that we had here. Most of it comes from trades, and as I mentioned, we had 11 trades. So what I've done here is I've taken a look at all the trades in isolation and said, right, who won each one? Let's go there. That doesn't tell the full story, though, because what we want to do is say who won each one in the context of their draft position, and effectively, for all the stuff that came in, what came out of it. So, for all of the draft capital you had coming in, how did you use it through trades and drafting and all of this clever stuff and maneuvering to make a team that you think is going to be worthy of this year? So let's look at them. And this is going to be relatively quick, because we can all see who won each of these, I think. In terms of and maybe I got some of these wrong, actually, but I don't know. I think the first trade was just a hanger out there. I didn't want the 403. Ed needed an extra quarterback because he had Carson Wentz on his roster still. Ed wins that, but it's fine. It's a throwaway fourth round pick. As we said, only maybe 5 to 10% of fourth rounders actually come out after the first or second year, or maybe their long term plays. We had a couple of blockbuster trades, and I really like this one just before the draft between Dan and Robert. Dan already had Deontay Johnson for context, so didn't need Pickens. Rob, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this might be a homer pick, so it might be a Steelers fan. But either way, and Rob is needing to rebuild a little bit and have a bit more youth. And Cooper and Waller are not youthful. But in the context of a straight up trade, yeah, I probably like Rob's side better for Dynasty because he's got a very young wide receiver who's come in with a young quarterback who's going to be tied together for the next 4 years. You would expect at least, versus two potentially win now players. Amari Cooper in a contract year, Darren Waller just moved teams. You weigh it up. I probably prefer George Pickens on that side, but objectively Dan wins because for winning this year he's going to be in a better position. There were some pick swaps going around. I'm having a look at this and I don't think it really matters a huge amount. Oh yeah, sorry, I traded away a third round for next year with Dan to get back into the third round because it was someone I wanted, but we'll see who that turned out to be shortly. But yeah, I guess it's pretty much a draw because it's that 25% chance versus 25% chance next year. It's not really much in it. And I also traded away Juwan Johnson, who was, I like Juwan Johnson. I think he's going to be good this year, but I made that into Devin A.K.A, and I like that a lot more. So that is a pick that I'm going to say I won based on this year alone. I think Juwan Johnson is going to be a longer term play. Generally, he's a lot older. I've got a young potentially stud running back who was taken the first in a lot of and probably would have been taken the first had I been in the late rounds there. Yeah, I think I just about win that one against Alex, but I think we're both pretty happy with where we got in context. We had some big trades involving a lot of pieces. John, despite wanting to rebuild, got Kyler Murray. I think maybe because he's going to take the hit this year. He realised he's not going to do great. First however many games, if Kyler Murray doesn't even play, fine. Ended up with my 2024 first round, which I traded away somewhere else. Alex ends up with that because I traded him in another trade and to the 210 as well, which Alex converted into some good players there. So I think Alex wins it just based on Kyler Murray's prospects this year. But yeah, I think John's got a strategy there he likes. We had a mega trade, though, involving Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry was received by John through the beneficiary of previous player dropping him accidentally and him betting a lot of fab on him, but it worked out well for John. John won the league with him, and Dan is going to hope to do the same this year and receives Ayuk and a 301 for a 2024 first round and 305. I think Dan crushed this one, but context, if John's giving it up, and John is wanting to own the 2024 draft and really likes May or one of the other. Is it Caleb Williams coming out of next year in quarterbacks? Maybe that's what his play. So we'll have to see what comes out of that. And I also, that first round that we talked about with Alex earlier was actually part of a trade between myself and John, where I got Mixon and DJ Moore. I really like DJ Moore. I really like Joe Mixon this year. I know they're getting on a little bit, but they're not that old. And I think still they've got 2 or 3 years of fancy relevance. Joe Mixon with a bit of a sort of Damocles hanging over him. Maybe he's going to get cut still. Maybe he's going to have a bit of a shave in terms of his salary, but I think he'll still get use. And the fact that they haven't brought too many people in to replace him is even better. And hopefully you can see this, and my face isn't over it. I can't see OBS right now, but the final one, we've got Rachaad White, which for Dan was all in on Rachaad White for a next year third and fourth round, which he'd amassed in elsewhere through a pillage of previous players' picks. Well, that was a bit of alliteration there. Yeah, I think he comes out on top for this year, definitely. But I can see what Alex is looking to do. And if we look at next year, Alex is going to own a huge amount of the 2024 draft. And Alex knows a thing about college football as well, so maybe she knows something better than we do. Elsewhere, we had a couple more. I was involved in 3 more trades actually towards the end. I got Gabe Davis. John was looking to get out. I managed to get that, trade up that 202 to a 201 and get Devin A.K.A. there as well. John was looking to get out of that position for some reason. I think he traded back again and got multiple third rounds out of it at some point. But I like the fact I needed another wide receiver, and I also got Godwin for that 105 to 108 trade as well. We also traded, Boz and I traded third rounders as well. So Boz moving up in the third round and the first round, and me getting Godwin and still retaining my third and first round picks, which is a bit further back. I got Quentin Johnson out of that. Very happy. That was the pick I wanted to go for. Obviously we all want Jackson Smith and Jigba. They went at number 2, so it wasn't going to happen there. On the standard tier, I crushed it, but according to their numbers, but I don't believe that's really the full story. And I think Boz has done some good things in terms of those rookie picks. And finally, we had a pick that was, as I mentioned before, I was at the 401. Rob needed some players. I gave away 401 for Rashard Penny. Rashard Penny being a bit of a gamble for me, but I like it. But if we look at the kind of the win ratios, I guess I did all right. I think I won 3 out of my. Was I really involved in 7 trades? Apparently I was. Crazy. So I come up with a 0.643 win rate. Ed apparently won his only trade. So he comes out with the best ratio there. John, I didn't like your position, drawing 2 and not really winning 2 either. I think John was definitely giving up a lot this year for hopes next year, but with the context that we want win now teams and we're interested in that in terms of power rankings, that's where I put John down at 0.25. Dan did very well and probably was the most vicious in his play, not wanting to lose any trades. He's the Howie Roseman of the league. 301 0.875. Alex, I think, was heavily involved again. I think, having taken on this team, not quite sure where it's going to go, looking to amass for next year. I like it. Boz was only involved in 1, and I think you lose it for this year, Boz. Sorry, mate. And Rob was involved with 2, and I'll give him the 50-50 split on that one. I like the Pickens pick better than I like the pick he got with the 401. But we'll see how that plays out. So what we wanted to do, and we'll take a quick break, but after the break, we'll go back into it and we'll look at individual draft breakdowns. And you'll see here we had 11 trades. What we wanted to do is look at the balance between trade addicts versus the trade skeptics, the people who weren't particularly involved in many trades. We'll compare against what they went into the draft with what they came out of the draft with, and look to give a good view of how they balanced out in the same kind of methodology. Let's do points in, points out, and a bit of analysis, jiggery pokery, to see how they fared. But we'll come back to that after the break. Right, competition time, guys. Rules are on the screen as you see them now, but part 1 is we're trying to drive subscriptions to rugbywithpads.com. You can find all the information here, but for every single subscription you make from £1 a month, you can get all the benefits like you would do on a normal Patreon. But as you go up, you can also get merch with it as well. And this is how we're selling our merch that you've seen me wearing during some of these YouTube videos as well. If you enter for as little as £1, you'll be entered into the competition. There's bonus entries for higher tiers as well. Now, we'll announce the winner of that on the pod once we've got a minimum of 10 subscribers, and then part 2 comes in. So get ready already. Go to youtube.com/rugbywithpads, click subscribe, and comment on any of the videos. And there's a fair few. We bring out the videos at the same time as we do on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you'll be entered into a competition to win either a t-shirt or a pop socket. It's free, but we must make sure that part 1 is won first. Let's drive that traffic over to rugbywithpads.com, and the draw announcements will be on the pod. I'll keep you updated with what we're doing and put some stuff on socials. Right, back to the pod. Hello and welcome back. And after what I hope was a very brief interlude for you guys, quite a long interlude for me. Thanks for bearing with us. If you're watching on YouTube, apologies if you lost some video in the last one. This is actually my third recording session, thus the change of clothes. I'm still getting used to all this streaming nonsense and making sure that we do audio recording properly. You would have thought I'd learn it after nearly a year now, but alas, not. So we're going to jump back straight in to the individual draft breakdowns. So you'll see that on your screen in a second. And audio listeners, thanks for bearing with us on this one. So let's jump straight back in. And I think what's really important to show is, on from the kind of out of pocket, just general draft breakdowns. We need to take a look at the effect of trading and the overall impact of everything that happened in the draft. Now, in the draft, as I mentioned before, we had 11 trades, which was super fantastic. It was really exciting to see, seeing as we're a league of people who don't often trade a huge amount. But I wanted to see how that affected the income and effectively your trade capital and your draft capital that you come in and what you received out of it. So what I've done is broken it down amongst the trade skeptics, the people who haven't done it a huge amount. So in this group of people, there's 3 trades total that we had to work on across 6 people, and all the other trades were performed by just 4 people. So lots of trade involvement from the other group. So what I looked at here was, based on your capital and what you received, how does it all balance out? Effectively, there is some crossover, and ultimately, Boz, he had the 105 and used the 105 coming out in something that to get Bryce Young. Bryce Young. Oh, I've forgotten his name there. But the young Carolina quarterback that he's got coming in, so that was something he used there, and Rob came in with a 401 and it was 401, that kind of thing. So we're just going to do a bit of cancellation, and we're going to put these into a calculator. Now, Keep Trade Cut has its detractors and it has its people who favor it. I think it's a tool that can be used to help push a narrative, as long as you apply some logic behind it. So what we did is we took all of the capital and everything everyone receives and put it through there and see what the score came out with. And I just wanted to do it because I wanted to compare the impact of not trading versus trading. Now, what we'll see here is a balance for each. So you're effectively value going in and value coming out. And we'll start with Boz. Boz started off with the 108, the 308, the 208, the 304, and the 408. And Chris Godwin, who he traded away to me, he came out with a 305. The Bryce Young, Ty J. Spears, Josh Down, and Keishon Butte. Now, when you look at this balance, it comes out favourable. He came out with a plus 742 balance, and remember these numbers; they're quite important when we're looking to compare against how he favoured. Now, Oz, you could say, had a decent draft. His Brady Gaga persona did pretty well. He got some players, especially in the context of this year, who I think are going to perform, and his rookie lineup looks better. He wasn't favouring Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was aging, so that was his choice. He wanted to refresh his roster a little bit, which was getting a bit older, and he managed to do that. So even though it's only a plus 742 on this one, I think it's actually pretty good. Let's move on to someone who did, I think, fantastically well, and mainly because maneuvered. They didn't have to maneuver around the draft. Effectively, what they did was just let the computer do it for them. And Ed, who is Lame Rogers here, came out with all a third. He was in position 3. He just used a 103 to all the way through to 403. He ended up trading away the 403 before the draft for Baker Mayfield. I then traded away that 403 as well. So he came out good there because he needed a quarterback. It's a Superflex league. But Anthony Richardson, possibly the best quarterback prospect you have this year. Zay Flowers, again, could be a breakout contender for the wide receiver 1 in that rookie class. And Tank Bigsby, who I think will do some work alongside Travis Etienne. His balance compared to Boz's of 700 is 4,500. So obviously it favours heavily players who are going to perform, and in a Superflex Superflex league and context, Baker Mayfield is going to have much more value, as is Anthony Richardson, compared to some of Boz's pickups, which were potentially backup guys. With Zay Flowers already being the wide receiver 27, Anthony Richardson being the super flex Dynasty QB9, it favors heavily on that side. So, and because he put in as much as he gets out, the calculator works out. So I think Ed, on the whole, and I've said it before, had a really good draft. Someone else who I think had a really good draft was Tim. He was drafting from the 9th spot. Gronk smash here, didn't trade, so had all the 9s. Jordan Addison, Rashawn Johnson, Jaden Reed, who is over in Green Bay, and Sean Tucker. I think it was a really good draft for him. And the numbers show it here, nearly plus 3,000 on his value balance here. Jordan Addison, I think, is going to be much better than advertised. It's someone I would have gone after the 108. But I had KJ Osborne. I felt like he might come good. Plus, I have the stack with Quentin Johnson, and Herbert. So, it wasn't something that I wanted there. It maybe could have got a bit more value from Rashawn Johnson, but I think Tim is betting on the fact that Rashawn Johnson will break out later on in the season. With Devonta Foreman and Khalil Herbert having previously had injury history. Rashawn Johnson was behind Bijan Robinson in college, so obviously shows a lot of talent, but maybe was outshone by Bijan, of course. Jaden Reed has the ability to play. I think that's something. And Sean Tucker, I've said it already, probably. I'm not sure I've recorded this so many times. It feels like I'm repeating myself. But I'm not all in on Rachaad White. I think Sean Tucker will have some success in this league. Someone else, again, we'll stick with all the good ones, and then we'll look at the less favourable ones. Let's go with Kristen, who is at the 106. And again, the balance here is based on the fact that it's a Superflex league, and CJ Stroud is going to be one of the top 3 quarterbacks coming into this year. Rashee Rice was an interesting one. Chase Brown, again, backup choice. Evan Hull didn't do much to move the numbers, but plus 3,000. I think mainly because so much value was held in CJ Stroud there. So, didn't have to reach too far because CJ Stroud dropped a little bit after we thought he might be 1, 2, 3 on the quarterbacks or 1, 2, 4 or something like that. Actually dropped to the 6th spot, just behind Bryce Young. I think they went, remember rightly, 3, 5, 6 in the first round. So yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. Well, you can go back and take a look at that on the first slide. So yeah, all those guys had good value. I think weirdly, Boz, because he traded a little bit, actually traded himself down a bit of value because Chris Godwin has a huge amount of value this year. And it does balance about a little bit. But I think overall, based on the context of what all these teams are looking to do, either consolidate teams who have done well. I think Tim and Ed in that position. Boz similarly in that position, I think. And Hillbilly's Kristen over there needed a quarterback. I think that was key. I think all of them are really good. Now, 2 players who didn't do as well, and I'll go a bit out of order here. At the bottom right, you can see Robert. I think Robert was doomed from the start because he adopted a team that only had 1 pick in the entire draft, and that was the 404. Yeah, it wasn't going to work out well for him. So he needed to trade back in to make some moves here, and did a little bit. So he used Amari Cooper and Darren Waller, who are aging, to 29 and 30 respectively, to get George Pickens, who is going to be young, tied to a young quarterback. Great. Used Rashard Penny to get the 401, which he turned into Juice Vaughn. Slim pickings in the 4th round. In the 4th round, only 5-10% of people actually come out good. It's probably going to be a bit higher in our league because it's only a 10-man league, but likewise Eric Gray looking to find something that might play. Eric Gray I think has a chance to get some time as well, especially if Saquon Barkley is a holdout. But the overall value here, it was never going to look pretty, was it? Minus 2,800, just because you didn't have the capital to play with, and you've given away some win now players, which the calculator favors here. But I think Rob did as best he could with the limited resources that he adopted this year. And over on the other side, we've got Kristen. And you know what? Despite having the lowest value, and we'll come out and say it, 3,967 in the negative, drafting from the 7th spot, we've already highlighted the fact that Sam Laporta was a bit of a reach, maybe. but I think could have value early on in the season, especially now that Jameson Williams isn't playing. Zach Evans definitely a reach there, especially with now Cam Akers and Sony Michel probably ahead of him in the pecking order. Stetson Bennett, not going to get much play, and it's a depth play and maybe a play for 2 or 3 years time down the road. But I think Dwayne McBride is maybe a bit more valuable than we see it, especially now with Dalvin Cook out of the book. So he's immediately gone to the RB2 over there in Minnesota. And even though Matterson hasn't had a checkered injury history, he's also not had a favourable starting history. So yeah, Dwayne McBride stands a chance of getting some play time there. So a bit of an odd mix there. I think the results here is that the par, if you're not doing a huge amount of movement in a draft, you're drafting relatively straight. You should be looking for a value of around the 700. So most of these guys did pretty well, and I think given the context, even Rob and Kristen didn't do too badly because they looked after team needs. I think Kristen maybe neglected the need at quarterback, but we'll go on to that in a little bit. But that's what we're working with. And what I wanted to do is compare whether trading a lot actually improves your odds of having a good draft. Now, let's look at these guys, because these guys, in terms of breaking it down, was much more complicated. John was involved in, on the left, Touchdown Mojo was involved in 4 trades, 4 blockbuster trades as well, both involving high draft picks and high capital. And Dan, likewise, 4 trades. If we cancel everything out, it comes out with John moved around the board a lot and ended up with 8 draft picks overall. So that's how it was a bigger, complicated mess to unpick. Whereas Dan ended up getting a lot more resources for later on, and this year than this year in terms of win now and some futures as well in his draft capital. I was involved in 7 trades, but a lot of those were minor trades. We talk about the Baker 403. I swapped a 3rd at some point. Juwan Johnson for a 2nd, which I really like, and moved around the board a little bit. I moved up or moved down a couple of spots with Boz at some point as well. And Alex getting jiggled with it, which is the best name in the league, I think now. Was involved in 3 trades: one with me, one with John, and one with one with Dan as well. If we cancel these guys down, I had a lot of cancelling down because I moved about a lot. Alex a bit less so. So what I did was plug all these into the same calculation, and I'm going to start with me because I think I came out of this draft thinking I did pretty well. And if we run down it, I started off with a 201 Baker Mayfield, Juwan Johnson, 105, 104, 401, a mid 2024 first, and a 2024 third. That's what my capital going in effectively. I came out with Joe Mixon. I had a hole in running back. I had a hole in receiver. I got DJ Moore and Chris Godwin. And I came out with a 2024 mid-second for my troubles as well. And in the draft, I picked up Jahmyr Gibbs, Quentin Johnson, and Devon Kane. I didn't draft anyone after the 201. So that's how the draft worked out for me. I also ended up getting Gabe Davis as a flex play, as well as Rashad Penny, who I think could lead that that room if DeAndre Swift doesn't really play to his level. Overall, I came out with a plus 6,000 balance, so that's miles above anyone who didn't do anything. And I think I can see that. If I look at my team going in, look at my team coming out, I think it's improved, and the places where I wanted to improve, I improved massively, which was wide receiver and running back. I didn't have a problem at quarterback yet. I might do next year with Aaron Rodgers potentially, but I was solid, and I think I did what I wanted to do. Not quite tank, not quite go for it all, but remain competitive and see what I can do in the waiver market. I thought I did well, and then I look at what Dan did, and Dan, compared to my 6,000 odd, Dan coming out with a plus 9,000. But that was, worked hard to get that, and Dan might have already referred to him as this, but the Howie Roseman of our league doesn't want to lose a trade. I don't think he's ever lost a trade in the history of the league that he's been in, and he's only been in it, I'm just trying to think, a little under a year, because he actually picked it up after the rookie draft last year, but came in with a 2024 mid first 305, George Pickens 304, mid 2024 fourth, sorry, 2023 101. So he used that on Bijan obviously, and the 204 and the 205. Came out with Henry, Ayuk, Amari Cooper, Darren Waller, Rashad White, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Mingo, Zach Charbonnet, and Will Levis. That is a haul. He did everything he needed to do. He's got a lot of win now players. He's got some futures as well, especially with Bijan Robinson, who is probably both win now and future, and just stacked his team, where he needed to. I still have some questions around quarterback for him, but overall, you look at the draft, capital in, capital out. What did you get? Massive value. John, on the other hand, I think struggled, but I think there's context here. John went for volume. Now, he used a lot of win now players: Derrick Henry, Brandon Ayuk, Joe Mixon, DJ Moore, and some of his other assets, and Gabe Davis as well, who I think stands a chance to do some things, especially with Diggs being in question. Came out and a bunch of picks, and came out with mid 2024 first, Kyler Murray, which was a bit of an interesting one, kind of a tank, kind of not. Kendre Miller, which I thought was an interesting choice, but very athletic. Dalton Kincaid, who I think will be fantastic. Marvin Mims, Luke Musgrave, bit of a homer pick there. Cedric Tillman, love tank. Israel, and I can't pronounce her. Israel Anaconda, Tank Dell, and Luke Schoonmaker, not Schoonmaker, but came out with a negative value balance. And I think this is where context needs to come into it. John is not looking to win this year. He is looking to consolidate and see what he can do the year after. He owns a couple more draft picks in the first next year. That's where he wanted to land, and I think he's done that, and will still be competitive in his side of the league, I think. But hasn't gone full tear down. I don't think he's really committed to that, but he's gained some good assets, especially in Superflex. I think Kyler Murray is a massive asset for him later down the line, because he was a former number 1 overall pick. He will find a place, even if it's not in Arizona. And finally, we have Alex here, getting jiggy with it. Started off with a 202, Kyler Murray, Rashad White, 102, 302, and 402. So did a little bit of moving around, but managed to get Juwan Johnson for that 202. Managed to get another 2024 first, a 2024 second, and a 2024 fourth for her troubles as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba from the 102 spot was a fantastic pickup. Hendon Hooker, I really like as a pickup as well. Michael Mayer and Jalen Hyatt. You know what? I can't fault this at all. And it came out with 3,400 value balance here. I think that makes sense. And I think that makes sense in the context of her team, because it was good already. She didn't need to improve much. She wanted depth play in certain positions and future play. I really like it. And I think Alex is definitely looking at 2024 as a draft. Alex follows more college than a lot of us do, and has a bit more understanding of some of the rookies that are going to come in. So I think that kind of reflected in her picks there. So it was good. I think for her, and I think what this proves is that trading can really help your draft capital. Now, what we did is this looks familiar too early on, but we broke down what the aggregate rank across all of our things that we were looking at across. We've already looked at power ranking. We've already looked at the volume adjusted. And what we've done here is just provided a value adjusted rank. So I still think Dan comes out on top. Bijan just weighs it massively for him. And even though I don't mean to put myself second, when I was looking to weigh up all these with analysis, both empirical evidence and my own feeling, I felt like I did pretty well out of this. And the aggregate rank I've got across here is number 2. Ed, it shows that you don't have to do anything to have a really good draft as well. Alex did a little bit and I think proved well. And Boz did just enough to make his draft sit above the rest, I think. And the best of the rest, I think John, he had a ambition to pick up a load of picks, and he did just that. So the volume adjusted is low because he picked up a lot of late picks, but he's going scattergun approach. If only 10% of them are gonna live in the fourth, he's giving himself the best opportunity to get the best out of that. Tim, I think, though he didn't move around, he potentially has some options in a vacuum. I think it's a good draft, but I don't think it's as good as others. Kristen and Kristen, we've talked about already. I don't think had the best drafts and maybe didn't address some needs there. And Rob, unfortunately, he was hamstrung by by the capital going in. So that's your kind of draft breakdown and whether it tells a full story. And I don't think it really does, because how do you measure the success of a draft? Yeah, and I think it's way too early to predict success because we need to see what the results are going to be, and that's why we've got the aggregate rankings over those three skills. I do think that Homer picks, picking players who are your own players, who you know more about, is a meta, and that's why overall I've adjusted for the analysis. It's not just pure numbers; it's based on what my reading and all of that, and it is subjective to a degree. But I've tried to remove myself and my own ego from the equation here. There are different strategies for different points in team maturity, though. I think that's been shown and evident with teams who want to win now in Dan, and teams who want to who got the highest, who won, quote unquote, won the draft, versus John, who maybe lost the draft a little bit, but he's looking to build a team for the future after having won a title. He's got his vig. He's looking to move on and look to build a dynasty for later on. Exactly what I did in first year. I went to win now in year one, and I had to tear it down in year two. Although I didn't tear it down well enough, probably, and I should have done more. But looking to rebuild that now. So that's why we get such variation in all the scores in there. I do think traders fared significantly better on average, twice as much value in their balance here, just based on the numbers there. And I think, looking at it, I think the people who had better drafts traded more. I think that's it. Ed showed auto drafting doesn't have to kill your team. The computer knows well, and sometimes ADP is ADP because it is consensus and more people together. Groupthink is sometimes better for you, especially if you are self-doubting. So maybe next year, Ed, lose your phone again. And I think the final takeaway I've got is that team building can have a negative effect on a perceived value of the draft. And I'd say compare me to John and the way John was going about it. I really liked his draft and the way he moved about, but came out with a negative value, whereas I came out with a more positive value, but that was because of where I am. But I think overall the draft is not where the league has won or lost, and this is why we do some critical roster analysis. That's what we'll be getting onto after the break here. Right, guys, jumping straight back into the roster recaps. Now, this section, if you're not in the league, may be a little bit dry, but hopefully you can get something out of it, regardless on roster construction in Dynasty and how it's going to look in Superflex moving forwards. So, what we did was look at all of teams and bring them out and give them kind of grades against each position, bearing in mind how important each position is. Now, we have a Superflex league, which is largely I'm just going to stop for a second. I'm going to start again. Right, guys, welcome back, and we're going to jump straight into our roster recaps once more. So this section is going to highlight how valuable a set of players each player has at all the positions. That is a description of a roster there, but in our league we've tried to balance it out with the way we're scoring to make sure that each position is equally valuable based on their rarity and scarcity at position. I don't think we've quite worked out tight end. It's a tight end premium league, but it's very heavily weighted towards Travis Kelce. Let's just say that. So without further ado, let's go into this. So I'm going to be giving grades across QB, wide receiver, running back, tight end, and of course the rookies. With the rookie rule being in place this year, you're going to have to play a rookie. So how are you going to fare moving forwards? And we'll start with the quote unquote winner of the draft, Dan, with the last dance here. You know what? It's a really good roster. Wide receiver A- with T. Higgins, Evans, and Devontae Adams. Really good. He's got Deontay in a flex spot. Ayuk he's traded for. Amari Cooper, Jonathan Mingo. It's really good lineup there. Running back has been improved with Derrick Henry and Bijan Robinson coming in. Kamara will definitely provide a role. Breakout from Pacheco potentially. James Conner. Yeah, it's a good looking lineup. Tight end still is one of the better groups, I think, with Pitts and Waller. He's got a plethora of options available to him, and the rookies, of course. Bijan, he's going to get an A+ in that rookie ranking regardless. Moving into this season, where I think Dan's going to struggle though is at QB, and coming into the year, coming out of last year, I thought it was quite good. Russ is potentially due for a regression to the mean, which for those of the uninitiated means it'll be normal again, hopefully. Jimmy G has been solid when he's been a system QB. Whether he'll be allowed to be a system QB under the same system QB, under Josh McDaniels, who he has had familiarity, I believe, with when he was over in over at the Patriots before. We'll see how it goes, but everyone else is a bit in question. Jordan Love is a starting quarterback, so he will be in the top 32, you would expect. Purdy, likewise, it looks like all signs are pointing to him to being the 49ers quarterback, but neither of them are really going to push you that extra mile. And with Jimmy G potentially being injured going into the season, Russ having laid a stinker last year, it's going to be difficult for me to give him anything more than a C+ on the grade there. Now, someone who has got a better lineup of quarterbacks is the guy who's looking after Brady Gaga Boz here. Lamar, Tua, Lance. Don't like Lance. Zappi and Bryce Young. I think Lamar, Tua, and Bryce Young are the three of the better young quarterbacks you can have at his disposal. And he's got a decent lineup elsewhere to back it up as well. With Mike Williams, DK Metcalf, Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Garrett, who is the rookie breakout success wide receiver, backed up by Brandon Cooks, who's in a better position now. Yeah, it's a good set of players there. Running back, he's got Chubb, who is low key a very good and reliable RB1. Pollard, who's got a lot of hype behind him, and so some bit part players, including Jamal Williams, Damian Harris, players who are going to have spikes, but I think he's going to be definitely weighting himself to pass catchers rather than running backs if you're looking at the way he's managing his flex spots. At tight end, Ertz and Higbee don't really light up really, and Hurst likely and Jelani Woods, neither here nor there. I've given him a D grade for that. And the rookies, you know what, Bryce Young picks it up, but I've said before already, Ty Spears and Downs, I didn't really like those picks in the context of Boz's team. He has got a solid team though in general. I do think he'll, on the face of it, it looks good, and he will remain high in the power rankings because of that. Now, a team that I really liked coming out of last season was previously Caroline's team and now Alex's team getting Jigba with it. I think that's pronounced correctly. I like it because it's got Fields in there, who is the breakout and is my guy for this year. I will be taking him in the League of Record as my keeper with a round 15 pick. Thank you very much. But Daniel Jones is not to be sniffed at, and had some 30+ point weeks last year. Where her lineup falls down a little bit is depth at the wide receiver position. I'm not sold on Jerry Jeudy, but Waddle and London I do think are poised for even further breakouts than what they had last year. Outside of that, it does fall down a little bit. JSN, is he going to be as valuable this year as next year? Maybe, but it's a decent set of lineups. It's maybe below par when you're looking at some of the powerhouses you're playing against. But running back is where this team shines again. Jonathan Taylor, Barkley, Akers, who is lined up for a lot of play. DeAndre Swift maybe playing second fiddle to Rashard Penny. I'm certainly hoping so. But it's a pretty good lineup at running back. Tight end, nothing much to write home about. Traded for Juwan Johnson, who I don't think is a starter quality, but Dallas Goedert, it definitely is. So it balances out in that side of things. And the rookies, I've given a B rating, mainly because she didn't go after quarterback that was really going to shine, and JSN is going to be a longer term play. But Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to play week in, week out in both 2 and 3 receiver sets. I think he's going to get his chance to be the number 2 as well as the number 3 from time to time. And I think Pete Carroll is going to scheme some stuff up with Geno Smith as well. Now, moving through, we've got Ed's team. Quarterback is looking a bit bare. A lot of people are maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, poo-pooing Matt Stafford. I like Matt Stafford a lot coming into this year. I think he's due for a bit of a renaissance. But so some of the other guys are just bit players. I think Baker and Howell won't play the whole season. Prescott, if he stays healthy, has got a lot of weapons around him, so it could be useful. But none of those players have the upside. Richardson is the only upside player in terms of running ability that I've got. But whether he's going to be consistent enough in his rookie season is to be decided. At wide receiver, though, Ed's team is really good. Devontae Smith, D Hop, Diggs, they're all fantastic, and he's got some players who could really take a step up. He has got the Ravens competition stack, I guess, with Bateman and Zay Flowers. But Kadarius Toney, I think, is due for a breakout, so I think he should be very confident going into the year, especially with D Hop potentially poised to go somewhere brilliant. Running back, though, he has got the definitive 1-2 punch. It's CMC and Jacobs. Bruce Hall being the number 3. He's even got Mattison, who's definitely had a massive upgrade in the offseason. A++ there for Ed. Tight end, not fantastic. Njoku and Fant, going to be great. I think Komet is probably the golden one out of that, but none of them are going to be league winners. But the rookies, I've said before, auto drafting worked out really well for him. Richardson is going to be great. Flowers will get a lot of play because if the Ravens are looking to move towards a more pass heavy offense, there will be more volume available to him. So I think he's going to do well, and I think he's going to be able to balance that team throughout the year as well. Tim is another one who's got a relatively scary team on paper. I'm always afraid to go against him. He's my bogey player. But Gronk Smash has got Josh Allen, possibly the number 1 quarterback out there. Geno Smith, who was fantastic, and I think will be solid again. Not much depth outside of that. Darnold might get a couple of games, but do you trust him not to see ghosts and throw picks? Davis Mills is out, unfortunately, I think, in Texans land. But the wide receiver group is disgusting. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Although that Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson competition over the Vikings, not what I would have gone for, but he'd pick the best player available. But Keenan Allen, Christian Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster, he's got wide receiver 1s for their teams coming out of the Yahoo. Running back looked better than it. I probably would downgrade this now. These grades were done a couple of weeks ago, but with Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, and Zeke, not really seeing someone to really jump out there. But you know what? He's so heavily weighted. It's a PPR league, so heavily weighted in the wide receiver room. He's going to be stacking with 4 wide receivers, I would imagine, on any given week. Hawkinson, I think, is a fantastic tight end, but there is no depth there, so I've had to knock him a couple of points there. And the rookies, outside of Addison, I don't think there's anyone who's going to play a week in, a week out. Maybe Reed if he manages to come up good, but he's receiving passes from Daniel Jones, White Chocolate, who is, or is it Vanilla? Vanilla Vic, that's what they've called him, isn't it? Who's going to be doing a lot more running than passing for touchdowns, I think. We'll have to see. Hopefully Tim will be thinking that Reed will be a player for him. I think that's the right guy anyway. Or is he the Green Bay guy? Either way, maybe I don't know my stuff, and I'll have to go back and correct that in the notes. Now, unfortunately, we're going to end this page with one that's not got a great outlook. Christian, I couldn't give you much more than a D grade for the whole team, unfortunately, just because there's not depth where you need it, and I think this team is in need of a bit of a jolt. But I do think you have players who could work above their station, but maybe not any of them are league winners on a consistent basis. At the quarterback position, Pickett is the young hopeful. Goff, I think, has QB1 upside, especially in that high-powered offense. Tannehill could be on the way out with Levis, maybe playing some games this year. Carr, I think, is in a better scenario than he was last year, marginally, maybe. Probably not actually. I think with the coaching, maybe is a bit of a downgrade. It's definitely an upgrade for his receivers, but maybe not for the car in general. Mariota is probably out of the league now. I think he's playing a backup at the Eagles potentially. I don't even know where he is, but he's not going to get much play this year, barring injury. CJ Stroud is a good pickup, and I think this is definitely a lineup that I'm looking at it and seeing the youth at quarterback, because Goff is still young despite being in the league for so long. feel like this is a league, this is a team built for a couple of years' time. But she does have some fantastic players in the wide receiver positions. Tyreek Hill could be my wide receiver one this year, I think. Terry McLaurin, Tyler Lockett has still got something left in the tank, I think. So, yeah, there's some good players there. There are some sketchy players there, potentially. But, yeah, there are some players who served her really well last year, and I think will continue to do so. The running back room is now looking a bit bare with Dalvin Cook without a team. David Montgomery is the RB1 there, and there's not much behind him. P. Ryan will probably be the 1A, 1B, I don't know, over in Denver. That's if Cook doesn't sign there. I think there's signs pointing there, but it's a bunch of backups there. So yeah, something in the trade market potentially would be useful. Tight ends, though, is a bit more of a boost because Mark Andrews is possibly my dynasty long-term view tight end one, because he's got so much more left in the tank compared to some of the other guys up there. He's fantastic, and although I had a bit of a down season last year, will come back strong, I'm sure, this year. And at rookies, she's got players to play. I think Stroud will have a lot of play, so it's almost tick that position off, and who else it's going to be. Is the rookie pick of Stroud going to limit her point scoring potentially, because she might be picking Stroud over Goff, Pickett, or Tannehill, who could each have their spike weeks, week in, week out. It's going to be a difficult situation for her to navigate. And I believe, actually, looking at this, you've got 6 quarterbacks here. I think our league limit is 5, so we'll have to see when roster cuts come before the start of the season how that plays out. Now, we'll get into the final 3 before we do a bit of a deep dive into my team. John, I think, has a really interesting side still, even though he's torn it down, mainly because he's got a really big boost from a dynasty perspective, not for this year, potentially. His quarterback position, Cousins is in a contract year. I think he'll probably end up staying over in Minnesota because I don't think there's any options for him to go elsewhere. Mahomes is the number 1 quarterback in this league because we have tied up the format to be 6 points for passing touchdowns. So running touchdowns don't matter as much. But Kyler Murray and Mac Jones, I think, are complementary. I think Mac Jones is due for again a regression to the mean. He's going to be more of his rookie self. I think. Not a lot of people have chalked up his decline last year to Matt Patricia, and I think he will come out swinging this year. Whether he's mature enough to take that responsibility, yet to be seen. A wide receiver, I probably should have given this a bit of a better one because looking at the moves now and things change so much. Jahan Dotson, I think, is a great. He could be the 1B in that team. I think and if Sam Howell is slinging it, a lot of options open to him. Hollywood Brown is now the wide receiver 1. He's moved around. It feels like he's moved around a lot. I know he's only had 2 teams, but it doesn't feel like he's been in the league long. But it puts himself in a good position with the bad quarterback. So it's who he's tied to. If Kyler Murray and Hollywood managed to come back and get that stack, that's a really nice bonus for John. Elsewhere, there's no one really. I really like that he's got a lot of youth there and people who are potentially poised for a breakout. So John will be hoping on those fronts. Running back, again, he's carved out his team a little bit, got rid of Henry, got rid of Joe Mixon, so he's left with Aaron Jones as a home pick. Travis Etienne, Dylan as another home pick, so he's got that stack, that super stack. Is it so much of a stack, or is it a bit of a detriment to his team at Green Bay? We'll have to see. I traded him Kenneth Gainwell last year, I believe. But Gainwell has games. He does. Kendrick Miller may be good, and Mr. Anaconda over there, yet to see whether he's going to be fantastic. Tight end is a solid room. Kittle, Schultz, Knox, Kincaid, and Musgrave. He's got the Buffalo team lined up there, Buffalo tight ends lined up there, and Musgrave being a home pick. Schultz, I think, will be the outlet for Stroud, so he'll be happy with that. And rookies, he's got a lot of depth, so he's not going to struggle with someone to play. It's whether they're going to be playing at a high level for him. Now, for those of you watching on YouTube, you will have seen the first couple of Fs on the screen, and I'm afraid to say it, Kristen, you get the first F in the list here for your quarterback room because I can only see one quarterback that's ever going to play. Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback. He is definitely up there in the dynasty sweepstakes. He's young, he's incredibly talented, and will be fantastic for the next 10 years. Minshew and Stetson, however, are not going to provide you any value in super flex. Minshew may play 1 or 2 games, I think, this year, depending on injuries and how Richardson develops, but he's not the long-term solution over there in Indy. And Stetson, I don't think is either. I think he, if anything, he could play a little bit if Stafford gets injured, or play in relief if they're really looking to tank. But I don't think it's really a tanking year for the Rams. I think it's a bit of a in the middle year. It's saved a little bit by some other positions. We'll skip to tight end because it's saved by the only A+ ranking I've got a tight end for Travis Kelce. Wow. If you have that, you're laughing. I really do like Laporta, and Otton, I think, will become a tight end one over there in, or a tight end one for the team over there in Tampa. Running back is a mixed bag. Eckler is my guy. He won me a championship last year. I'm forever in debt to him. But you've got some players without teams here, with playoff Lenny not having a playoff position, Jerick McKinnon being the second guy, Mostert potentially going down the pecking order as well, Isaiah Spiller being the handcuff to Eckler. We don't see many handcuffs in this league, and I think that's a wise one because Eckler could miss some time. Who's going to back him up? Is it Spiller? I don't think they've invested elsewhere. I'd have to look. But Zach Evans, I don't think is going to get the play. I think he's gone down the pecking order a little bit. He might get some spike play, but there's a lot of players in that running back room, and he could be a surprise cut even before the season starts over at Rams. Wide receiver is probably slightly better. Adam Thielen still has some juice in the tank, and I think he could carve himself out to be the one over there. CeeDee Lamb is better than advertised. Olave is due for a fantastic season, I think. Just volume play. Cup as well. Who else are they going to throw to over there? But everyone else is a bit of a bit part player. DPJ, Nicole Harbin, Darius Slayton, who I think could, this could be one of his last years potentially. Nico Collins, we haven't seen enough of him, I don't think. And Chase Claypool is the number 3 there in not a very pass-heavy offense. We'll have to see how that one plays out. Overall, I think we've discussed it with Kristen being lower on the draft pecking order. I really hope that she's able to move around and be a bit more competitive in certain positions, especially at QB, because I think that's a position of need. Maybe she could look to do some business with Kristen, who has 6 QBs at the moment. Robert, who's new to our league, has both an F grade and an A+ grade as well. So these are both teams that flirt a little bit. The obvious there is the F is on rookies, with Juice Ford and Eric Gray being the only rookies on his side. He's going to find it tough to field that position each week, especially not having a huge amount of options. There are still rookies available in the waiver market, so you can look there as well. But the A+ for the QB room, just for the top 2, it's the most consistent QB room that I think anyone has. Hurts and Burrow, love it so much. Malik Willis, is a filler player. I can see him getting dropped. But Hurts and Burrow is a ridiculous combo and will be for the next 10 years. So Dynasty outlook is brilliant. Wide receiver room leaves a little bit to be desired. Debo didn't have the... I traded with a former owner. I traded away Debo, and I traded him away at the right time. Although I traded for Michael Pittman, so it didn't really work out for me. But I got a first out of it as well. But Debo didn't have the season he wanted last year. Tyler Boyd is a 3 in that trifecta. AJ Brown is out of the league now, I think, so that needs to be dropped there. Some of these players might have already been dropped. OBJ has found a home, though. I like that. And Calvin Ridley has a potential to be great. Also has a potential to be bad. Also has potential to be average. A huge range of outcomes for him because we haven't seen him. Found out today he's actually still playing on his rookie contract. He's been in the league like 7 years. But because he's missed 2 of them, it's bonkers. And he came into the league late, so he is... I think he's going to turn 29 this season as well. So, not a huge dynasty play, but I give it a bit of props for that, for holding on to him. Running back room is full of second stringers. Jeff Wilson, Sanders is probably the only number 1 there. Oh no, he's got Damian Pierce. So you can make a lineup out of those guys as well. As well as the aforementioned rookies. At tight end, you've got a Okonkwo, the Muth, who I like better now going into the season than I did, and Dulcich, who could be making the leap this year. Overall, I think you can see from the grades here where I believe the roster's fit for this year and onwards. Let's take a look at mine, because I I thought I'd be happier with mine after the draft, and I wasn't. So this continues our Road to Redemption review series, which we will be touching in on every week on the Thursday show as well. So how we're looking, what our position is going to look like, because I want anyone who's not in the league currently invested in this team as well, and what we're doing, because we're looking to make it active. And coming out of the draft, I was pretty happy at quarterback, no change there. Wide receiver, I was okay with. Looking at it, it's a lot of guys who are boom or bust capacity. Running back, I'm pretty chuffed with. Tight end, I'm not. I'm a rookies. I feel like my rookies are a real strength of this side. Jameer Gibbs, Devon A.K.A, Quentin Johnson, they're looking good. If I look at what I had to give away for that, I did make some drops. Allen Robinson didn't make the cut. Mike White didn't make the cut. Michael Carter didn't make the cut. Benny Skronek, Logan Thomas, and I had some guys on my taxi squad, Jalen Tolbert and Kyron Williams, another Ram, that didn't make the cut either. And obviously I lost out on Baker Mayfield and Jordan Johnson in trades. Now, I did have some really good wins in the veteran market, though. Joe Mixon, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Gabe Davis, Rashard Penny. If I look at who I dropped and look who I gained, it's definitely an improvement to the side. And going into the first round of free agency as well, I was really considering who I'd need to drop, because my plan was to elevate these 3 starter potential. Because I didn't draft anyone after the 201. That I manoeuvred myself in position to have 2 first-round picks and 1 effective first-round pick, being the 201. There's players who were going to have to fall out of contention. I think Bobby Trees was on his way out, where he was before. He was at Tennessee before, didn't play well. Houston, is he going to play much better? He's slow now, unfortunately. I love him. He was fantastic at the Rams. KJ Osborne, I think with Jordan Addison coming in, he's a 3. And I need 1s and 2s. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they didn't pick up his 5th round option. It kills me to get rid of him, because he was a 3rd or 4th round pick in a startup. So it really kills me there. There were some other people who I'd considered on the bubble as well. Gerald Everett, I was on the bubble about. Desmond Ridder, I was on the bubble about as well. But you know what, I needed positional play there. I think Sky Moore is going to have a better season than he did last. I think he's the breakout potentially behind Tony. Trey McBride, potentially, if they look to get rid of Ertz, because Ertz has a big contract. If they're looking to tear it down, there could be some surprise post June and July cuts there as well, especially going into training camp. So we'll have to see. But in the first round of free agency and the waiver market, I made 14 transactions. Let's put it in play. I made plays for 5 players in lots of different combinations, effectively. Players who I thought would be better than the guys on the bubble, and I could elevate into my squad. And you know what? I won all of them. Not very in the league there. So I ended up winning out on Mike Gesicki, who was a drop from, I believe, Tim, maybe? I think was it Tim or Rob, one of the two. I also stacked at tight end, which was a position of weakness for me, and I think I've moved my D grade up to a C here. I've got Tucker Kraft, and now on the taxi squad, who are players that I'm could elevate later on the season, but I think maybe have breakout capability later. Darnell Washington, athletic freak. I loved him going into the draft. Probably not in the right position to be a pass catcher, but I think may have that potential later down the line because he's just so big. He has a lot of red zone upside there. Zach Kuntz over in Jets, because can you name another Jets tight end? I couldn't. And I thought there's some advantage there to being a relatively high drafted name there. And Puka Nacua, who I looked at the opportunity to him in the Rams, and I was just thinking, they're not throwing to anyone else, so I'm really, really happy with that. I had a turnover of 12 players, so 52% of my lineup has been turned over. So it's a big difference, and I'm much happier about it going into this season than I was the last. So watch this space. I think we could do some good things with this team. But it doesn't matter how good your team is in isolation. It matters how good your team is when compared with others. And that's why we do power rankings. Now, we do the power rankings in our league, and John has been fantastic at doing it through the middle of the season. I'll probably work with him to do that again this next year. We will have a segment on this pod to replace. I wrote recaps every week and try to talk them up a little bit, but we'll do a recap of the league every week to replace that and announce our power rankings each week as well. In the off season, we have a lot of change. You'll see in this graph, a huge amount of change. But you know what? Let's go from the top, and let's not spoil it. And let's see who I think is due for success post draft here. And I've talked him up already, and he's going to hate it because I'm giving him some bad juju here. But Dan with The Last Dance, is my number one ranked team going into the preseason. Not, we're not finally there, but going into the preseason, there's a lot of things that can happen in camp yet, and I might have have another updated view on here. But solid draft. He's definitely improved his stock here. He's going all in on this season, I think, although still giving himself an option to be flexible next. So he's done good. Let's put it that way. Number 2, I've got Ed. Would be surprised there. Ed, I think, suffered from some difficult transactions in the waiver market, so I dropped him down pre-draft. But post-draft, he did everything he needed to do, and everything he needed to do was lose his phone. So well done there, mate. Alex comes in third here. As I said, I was very bullish on Caroline's team before she decided she wanted to move away from this league and give Alex a chance to take on her very good roster. Who has come 9th and 6th, I believe, but fantastic roster that was just suffered with injury chaos over the last couple of years, which I'm sure it was definitely not Caroline's fault. Alex has guided this to be a roster to contend with, I think, and probably the contender in the Western Conference. Oz comes next. He's dropped a little bit after coming second, losing out narrowly in the final, but second is the first loser, unfortunately, Boz. He's got a good lineup, and I think he's going to be very competitive in what will be a very competitive Eastern Conference, and we'll see that in a minute. Tim comes next, taking up the kind of the worst of the best. Sort of rounding out the top 5. Sorry, Tim's got a good lineup. Can't fault it. He did well from the 9 spot and has consolidated. It's just solid. He will fare very well. I put myself at 6th, not because I'm too humble. I do think I've improved my squad. I think I've just demonstrated that, and that's why I'm down here at 6th. I don't think that's going to help me out too much because a lot of my competitors in the Eastern Conference, and we'll get into that in a minute, who are going to be considerably better than me. John, despite him moving around quite a lot, he's gone from 1st to 7th. We know that he's done a bit of a tear down, but I don't think it's catastrophic, and I still think he will be a decent player this year. Kristen, I put at 8, dropped down a little bit. There is just not enough depth there in the skill positions. Kristen, unfortunately, has the opposite fate. There's depth in the skill positions, but not at the key one, the most important position in all of sports, the quarterback. And Rob has a very difficult task ahead of him, having taken on a side that need a lot of care. It probably still needs a rebuild. It's going to be tough for him, and I think it's going to be a challenge that he's hopefully up for. He's already shown an interest in doing being risky with some trades as well. But that doesn't tell the whole story. And what I wanted to do is compare everything against projected wins. So what I did is I looked at the best possible lineup from now. This is the projection in Sleeper of what everyone would do. And you know what? Let's just go through the rankings. In the Eastern Conference, so we do an Eastern Conference versus Western Conference mini competition as well. So effectively, the Eastern Conference is everyone in the UK who plays. We have some players in the US as well, and some people who've come in and out of that lineup but majority US. Last year, the US contingent wiped the floor with us, and they had a US champion in John, who is a convert, I guess. So he moved over there a few years ago, but this year I think the Eastern Conference is going to be very competitive with a win percentage of nearly 2/3 here. I think Tim's going to run away with it, and this is actually no. I'm not going to say I think. This is what is projected. Tim is projected to run away with it at 12-2, which would be the best regular season finish we've had, the most convincing anyway. Ed with 10-4. And rounding out the league, we have a tie at 8-6 between myself and Dan. I think Dan will probably get it on the head-to-head at the moment. This is projecting. This is what I've projected. And sorry, this is not my projection. I'm going to stop saying I think. This is what is projected by Sleeper. So this is pure numbers. And Boz rounding out the rear, despite having a fantastic team, I just don't think it doesn't seem that the matchups are going to be favourable to him, and losing out 6-8, which is still a very respectable score and probably would have got him into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference last year. So if the Eastern Conference 0.667, Western Conference has got to be 0.33, right? And that's right. I think, well, it would seem that Alex, gotta stop saying I think, it would seem that Alex is going to run away with it 11-3. Not quite as good as Tim, but still very respectable. And it's going to be a good year for her if she manages to manage this team well. And then it drops. We've got Robert sneaking into the playoffs at 5-9. That's a Giants style score there. And even John, in the midst of a teardown, 4-10 will make it into the playoffs. And whether he can go further than that, we'll have to see. Which rounds off Kristen at 3-11, with I think one of those sides not picking up a win until week 3 or 4, which would be a shame according to the projections. Does this tell the whole story? I don't know, but if we look at the power rankings versus the projected wins we've got here, I'll just map it against here. My power rankings versus the sleeper gods. It thinks Tim is going to play significantly above his rank here. Boz played down from his rank, and Dan, despite being ranked number 1, is probably going to have a harder season. We think, and it is going to have to require some manoeuvring throughout the year. I think this highlights to me that I need to do something to put myself out there and put myself above and get that 3rd spot. Otherwise, it's going to be a very sad year for me, and I'm going to have another year of disappointment. Not going to be able to get back to the top, I don't think, though. I think Robert, by the looks of it, is going to have a better season based on the conference schedule. So the way it works is everyone plays each other once. Each conference plays inside the conference twice, and there is an additional game with a rival. So my rival is Alex, and I think I'm suffering because I'm playing Alex, who's got a very strong side, whereas I believe Robert's is Boz's. So I think Rob is going to have a better time of it than maybe his power ranking suggests, which is his bottom. It's a bottom ranked power side. He could be the worst to first kind of guy. You never know. There's a lot of things that could happen in the playoffs. But I think there's going to be a struggle for some people in the Western Conference to justify holding on to their teams and not wanting to do a rebuild, because there is some structural considerations to have on some of those sides. So that's how I think the league is going to play out, and a lot is left to be said. Really hope you've enjoyed this, John. If you've listened this far, really appreciate you giving the time to listen to what is a very self-indulgent episode. It's one of those things that I want to do, and as I said at the top, what I wanted to do was provide fantasy football some storylines and things that I really like out of American football, watching the real sport, and map them into the game that I love so much of fantasy. So hopefully, we can see some rivalries over the next few months emerge as we go into the season. We'll see how it happens. I'll keep you updated about what's going on in the league, and we'll do some further deep dives if you like this kind of content. Hopefully, if you're in the league, you like this kind of content, because this is what you sign up for by working with a megalomaniac commissioner here. Not really a megalomaniac, but you know what I mean. Thank you so much for listening. I'll do the standards. You can support the pod in so many ways. If you go to rugbywithpads.com, you can support the pod through either donations or signing up to a membership and getting some merch as well, so you get something back. Really appreciate it if you want to go and do that. If you do, there is a competition open still. We've been slow boiling it over the off season with a few entries here, but if you really want to enter and win yourself more merch and and some other stuff as well, there is an opportunity to do that. It'll probably be in the mid-roll somewhere in this episode as well. What else could you do? You could go follow us on socials at Rugby with Pads on Twitter and Instagram, and of course on YouTube if you're listening to this on audio. Like and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever you can do. Really appreciate it as well. There is also a competition to push people towards YouTube as well. So if you go and comment hashtag RWP on that, the first 10 subscribers who do that will be eligible for another competition as well to win some merch, and you don't even have to put any money down. Even better. Thank you so much for listening. Really do appreciate it. I will stop babbling on. You'll see me in the next couple of weeks with some tiers, finishing off the beginner series with the draft 102, which is for intermediate these days. Got to give you guys credit for keeping up. And we'll be doing mock drafts and things like that going into season. We have 60 days, 65 plus days before the season starts, I think. Maybe it's 75. It feels like a long way, but there's so much more we want to talk about. So we really appreciate you listening, and hope to see you again soon. And with that, I will see you all on the virtual gridiron.